Charlie! John clambered through the rumble toward the place where she'd been, choking on the dust of the explosion. The ruins shifted beneath his feet, and he stumbled over a block of concrete and caught himself just before falling, scraping his hands raw as he grabbed frantically at the broken surface. He reached out, the place where she'd been. He could feel her presence beneath him. He could He took hold of an immense block of concrete and hefted it with all of his strength. He managed to tilt it from the pile and overturn it, where it fell with a thud, rattling the ground he stood on. Over his head, a steel beam creaked, wavering precariously. Charlie! John cried her name again as he shoved another block of concrete away. Charlie, I'm coming! He was gasping for breath, moving the remains of the house with desperate, adrenaline-fueled strength, but the adrenaline was running thin. He set his jaw and pressed on. His palm slipped as he tried to lift the next block, and when he looked, he realized, dazed, that his hands left streaks of blood wherever they touched. He wiped his palms in his jeans and tried again. This time the broken concrete moved, and he balanced it on his thighs and took it 3 steps away. Then dropped it on a pile of debris. It crashed down into the rubble and shattered rock and glass beneath it, starting an avalanche of its own. And then, beneath the sounds of wreckage, he heard her whisper, John! Charlie! His heart stopped beating as he whispered back to her, and again the rubble moved under his feet. This time he fell, landing hard on his back, knocking the wind out of him. He struggled to inhale, his lungs useless. Then, hauntingly, he began to breathe. He sat up, light-headed, and saw what the collapse had revealed. He was in the little hidden room in Charlie's childhood house. Before him was a plain, smooth metal wall. All at the center was a door. It was all an outline without hinges or handle, but he knew what it was because Charlie had known. When she stopped running in the midst of their escape and pressed her cheek against the surface, calling to someone or something inside. John, she whispered his name again, and the sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, bouncing off the walls of the room. John got to his feet and put his hands on the door. It was cool to the touch. He pressed his cheek to it just as Charlie had. It had grew colder. It was like draining the warmth from his skin. John pulled back and rubbed the cold spot on his face, still watching the door as the shining metal began to dull before his eyes. Its color paled and then the door itself began to thin. It solidly vanished until it looked like frosted glass. John saw that there was a shadow behind the glass, the figure of a person. The figure stepped closer, the door clarifying until he could almost see through it. He moved closer, mirroring the figure on the other side. It had a face, sleek and polished, its eyes like a statue's, sculpted but unseen. John peered through the door between them, his breath clouding the near transparent barrier. Then suddenly the eyes snapped open. The figure stood presently before him, the eyes fixed on nothing. They were clouded and unmoving, dead. Someone laughed, a frantic, mirthless sound that echoed in the small, sealed room, and John looked away around for the source. The laughter rose and pitched, growing louder and louder. John covered his ears with his hands as the piercing noise became unbearable. Charlie! He cried again. John jerked awake, his heart racing. The laughter went on, following him out of the dream, disoriented. His eyes darted around the room, then lit on the TV, where a clown's painted face filled the screen, caught in a conclusive fit of laughter. John sat up, rubbing his cheek where his watch had been pressing into it. He checked the time. then breathed a sigh of relief. He had just enough time to get to work. He sat back, taking a moment to catch his breath. On the TV screen, a local news anchor was holding a mic for a man dressed as a circus clown, complete with a painted face, a red nose, and a rainbow-colored rig. Around his neck was a collar that looked like it belonged in a Renaissance painting, and he was wearing a full yellow clown suit with red pom-poms for buttons. So tell me, the anchor said brightly, did you already have this costume, or did you make it especially for the grand opening? John switched the TV off and headed for the shower. He'd been on it all day, but the noise was still unbearable. A rattling, clanging din, punctuated by shouts and the intermittent earth-shaking clatter of jackhammers. John closed his eyes, trying to blow it out. The vibrations resounded in his chest, filing him up, and amid the noise, the sound of desperate laughter suddenly rang into his ears. The figure from his dreams came to him again, just out of sight, and he felt as though if he just turned his head the right way, he could see the face behind the door. John. John turned. Lewis was standing a feet away, giving him a puzzled stare. I called your name 3 times, he said. John shrugged, gesturing at the chaos around them. Hey, some of the guys are going after this. You coming? Lewis asked. John hesitated. Come on, it'll be good for you. All you do is work and sleep. He laughed good-naturedly and slapped John on the shoulder. Right, good for me. John smiled back, then looked at the ground as the expression faded. I just have so much going on right now. He tried to sound convincing. Right, lots going on. Just let me know if you change your mind. He clapped John on the shoulder again and headed back to the forklift. John watched him start away. It had been the first time John had turned him down, not the second time or the third time. It occurred to him that eventually they would stop trying, that there'd be a moment when they would just all give up. Maybe that would be for the best. John, another voice called. Now what? It was the foreman, showing him from the door of his standalone office. A trailer had been brought on site for the duration of the construction and sat precariously on a dirt ledge. John trod across the construction zone, ducking through a vinyl sheet in the trailer's doorway. Moments later, he was standing across a folding table from the foreman, the plastic wood texture paneling barely holding onto the walls surrounding him. I've got a couple of guys out there telling me you're distracted. I'm just focused on my job, that's all, John said, forcing a smile and trying to prevent his frustration from leaking out. Oliver smiled unconvincingly. Focused, Oliver mimicked. John dropped the smile, startled. Oliver sighed. Look, I gave you a chance because your cousins say you're a hard worker. I overlooked the fact that you walked off your last job and never came back. You knew I took a risk on you. John swallowed. Yes, sir, I know. Stop with the sir. Just listen to me. Look, I do what I'm told. I don't understand the problem. Your reactions are slow. You look like you're daydreaming out there. You're not a team player. What? This is an active construction zone. If you're in La La Land or you're not thinking into the safety of the other men or there, someone's going to get hurt or killed. I'm not saying you have to share secrets and braid one another's hair. I'm saying you have to be on the team. They have to trust that you're not going to let them down when it counts. John gave an understanding nod. This is a job, John. I think these are good guys out there too. Work isn't easy to come by these days, and I need you to get your head into the game. Because next time I see you in the clouds, well, just don't put me in a position. Understand? Yeah, I understand. John said mumbly. He didn't move, staying in the shag brown carpet that came with a portable office as though waiting to be dismissed from detention. Okay, get out, John went in. The, dre- the dressing down had taken up the last few minutes of his workday. He helped Sergey put away some of the equipment, then headed to his car with a muttered goodbye. Hey, Sergey called over him. John stopped. Last call. John broke off, spying Oliver out of the corner of his eye. Maybe next time, he said. Sergey pressed. Come on, it's my excuse to avoid that new kid's place. My daughter's been begging me to go there all week. Lucy's taking her, but robots creep me out. John paused, and the world grew silent around him. What place? John said. So you coming? Sergey asked again. John took a few steps backward as if he came too close to a ledge. Maybe another time, John said, and walked decidedly to his car. It was all in brownish red. Something that might have been cool in high school. Now it was just a reminder that he was still a kid who hadn't moved on. A mark of status that had become a mark of shame within the space of a year. He sat heavily, a palm of dust shining out the sides of the car seat as he dropped onto it. His hands were shaking. Get a grip. He closed his eyes and clutched the wheel, steadying himself. This is left now, and you can do, he whispered, then opened his eyes and sighed. Sounds like something lame my dad would have said. He turned the key. The drive home should have been 10 minutes, but the route he took was closer to half an hour. As he avoided driving through town, if he didn't drive through town, there was no risk of running into people he didn't want to talk to. More importantly, he didn't risk running into people he did want to talk to. Be a team player. He can't muster real resentment toward Oliver. John wasn't a team player, not anymore. For almost 6 months, he had been coming and going from home to work like a train on a track, stopping to buy food now and then, but not much else. He spoke only when necessary, avoided eye contact. He startled he was startled when people spoke to him, whether they were coworkers saying hello or strangers asking the time. He made conversation, but he was getting better at speaking while walking away. He was always polite while also making it clear he had somewhere to be, made obvious when necessary, by suddenly turning in the opposite direction. Sometimes it felt like he was fading away. It was jarring and disappointing to be reminded that he could still be seen. He pulled into a lot of his apartment complex, a two-story building not for long-term tenants. There was a light in the window of the manager's office. He had tried for a month to track opening hours, then given up, concluding that there was no pattern. He grabbed an envelope from the glove compartment and headed toward the door. He knocked. There was no response. Though inside he could hear sounds of movement, he knocked again, and this time the door opened partially. An old woman with the skin of a lifelong smoker peered out at him. Hey, Delia. John smiled. He didn't smile back. Rent check. John handed an envelope to her. I know it's late. I came by yesterday, but no one was here. Was it during business hours? Delia peered into the envelope. Carefully was though suspicious of what might be inside. The lights are off, so then it wasn't during business hours. Delia bared her teeth, but it wasn't really a smile. I saw you hung up a plant, she said abruptly. Oh yeah, John peered over his shoulder toward his apartment, as though he might be able to see it from where they stood. It's nice to take care of something, right? John tried to smile back but quickly gave up, engulfed in a vacuum of judgment that allowed for no levity. That's allowed, right? To have a plant? Yes, you have a plant. Delia took a step back inside and looked poised to close the door. People don't Usually settle in here, that's all. Usually there's a house, then a wife, and then the plant. Right. John looked down at his shoes. It's been a rough, he began, but the door closed with a firm thunk. Year. John considered the door for a minute. Then headed to the ground floor apartment at the front of the complex, now his from another month. It was a single bedroom unit with a full bath and half a kitchen. He kept the blinds up while he was away to show that he had nothing. The area was prone to burglaries. It seemed like a safe yet to telegraph the fact that there was nothing to steal there. Once inside, John locked the door behind him and carefully slid the chain into place. His apartment was cool and dark and quiet. He sighed and rubbed his temples. The headache was still there, but he was growing accustomed to that. The place was sparsely furnished. It had come that way, and the only personal touch he had added to the living room was to stack four cardboard boxes full of books against the wall below the window. He glanced at them with a disappointed familiarity. He went to the bedroom and sat down on his bed, the springs creaking stiffly beneath him. He didn't bother turning on the light. There was enough daylight still leaking through the small, dingy window above his bed. John looked toward his dresser, where a familiar face looked back at him. A toy rabbit's head, its body nowhere to be found. What did you do today? Excuse me. John said, meeting the plush rabbit's eyes as if it might show a spark of recognition. Theodore just stared back blankly, his eyes dark and lifeless. You look terrible, worse than me. John stood and approached the rabbit's head. He couldn't ignore the smell of mothballs and dirty fabric. John's smile faded and he grabbed the head by the ears and held it to the air. Time to throw you away. He considered it almost every day. He clenched his jaw, then set it back on the dresser carefully and turned away, not wanting to look at it further. He closed his eyes, not expecting sleep to come, but hoping. He had slept well the night before or the night before that. He had come to dread sleep. He put off as long as he could, walking miles of road until late at night, returning home and trying to read or just staring at the wall. The familiarity was frustrating. He grabbed his pillow and went back to the living room. He lay down on the couch, swinging his legs over the arms so he could fit. The silence on the little apartment was beginning to ring in his ears, and he grabbed the remote off the floor and turned on the TV. The screen was black and white, and the reception was terrible. He could scarcely make out faces through the static, but the chatter of what sounded like a talk show was rapid and cheerful. He turned the volume low and settled back, staring at the ceiling and half listening to the television voices until slowly he drifted into sleep. Her arm was limp. The only part of her he could see dangling from the twisted metal suit. Blood ran in red rivers down her skin, pulling in the ground. Charlie was all alone. He could hear her voice again if he tried. Don't let go, John. She called my name, and then that thing. He shuddered, hearing again the sound of the animatronic snapping and crunching. He stared at Charlie's lifeless arm as if the world around them had disappeared. It was the noise echoed in his head, his mind conjuring thoughts unbidden. The crunching sounds were her bones. The tearing was everything else. John opened his eyes with a start, a few feet away. A studio audience left, and he looked at the TV. A static and chatter bringing him back to waking life. John sat up, rolling back to his workout kicks. The couch was too small and his back was cramped. His head ached and he was exhausted but restless. The shot of adrenaline is still working its way through his system. He went out, locking the door forcefully behind him and breathed in the night air.